All right, so we're on to problem number 2. We just finished the one that had the cosine of x squared times e to the x. This one, it looks slightly more complicated because now we have the natural log and we have 2 terms, and this one is double chain rule because we have a function in here raised to a power, so automatically that's a chain rule, and then we have a function here inside of another function. So the way to do it when you have 2 terms in the problem, they're in the original function that both have chain rule, is you literally just do chain rule twice. So think of it as this is going to be one chain rule and this is going to be one chain rule. So in this case, we're only using the one rule, but we're using it twice. So that's why I picked this problem to do. So I guess let's jump right into it. So f prime of x. So as I said in the previous problem, you very rarely start with what's in the parentheses. So we're going to start with the natural log. The derivative of the natural log of something is 1 over that same something. And then you have to multiply it by the derivative of whatever it's the natural log of. So in this case, it's sine of x. Okay, so that's the first term right here. And then we're going to subtract the second term. So again, we're not going to start inside the parentheses. We're going to start with this. So basically just pretend that this is something to the 10th power. So the power rule says you multiply the power to the front, leave everything else inside the same, and then this power gets -1. And then you multiply that whole thing times the derivative of what's inside the parentheses. So it's the derivative of x to the 4th minus 3x. And I'm going to change these to brackets because we got a bunch of parentheses right now. So that was the first step. So I usually don't write out this part. I just multiply it right to the end. But if you're not very comfortable with using chain rule, I absolutely would write it out because it helps you keep track of what steps you're doing and you can check one step at a time. So moving on to the next step, now we're going to leave the part that we just did the same because we don't want to take the derivative of it twice. But now we're only going to look at this part that we still have to take a derivative of. So we still have 1 over sine x, that doesn't change. Then we're going to multiply it by what's the derivative of sine? That's cosine. So that is the first part. And we're going to subtract it. It's very important that you keep the signs the same, especially if you're writing it out like this because it starts to be a lot to keep track of. We're going to write this part we already took the derivative of the same way, and then we're going to multiply it by the derivative of what this is. So same, this is just power rule, so it's 4x cubed minus 3, and then boom. And then now we simplify. So that doesn't always happen. We don't always get a nice pretty answer. So like this one is going to be very difficult to simplify. But this term simplifies pretty nicely. So cosine times 1 over sine becomes cosine over sine, which is just cotangent. So it's the cotangent of x minus, and then when I get something like this personally, I write it in order of like power from lowest to highest. So I would write it as 10 times 4x cubed minus 3 times x to the 4th minus 3x to the 9th. And that's just how I write it, so I can get rid of a lot of the things that like, so the 9 isn't between the parentheses anymore, and it just looks prettier to me. But so the biggest thing with this one is obviously we had a lot of terms going out. This one was a lot longer in terms of like how far across the page it went than the last one. So the problem, or the tips I have for this problem, would mostly just be go slow, do it one step at a time until you're super, super comfortable at it. That's why I'm writing it out this way. I usually would just go straight from here to here, but I wouldn't do that until you're 100% comfortable going from here to here to here. So don't skip this step until you're comfortable enough to do it. And then just make sure that when you're simplifying, when you get something like cosine over sine, just double check and make sure that there's not like some tiny tangential rule that you're gonna be able to use to simplify more. I don't think this is an actual rule in terms of how I simplified it here, but that's just how I prefer to look at it. So technically these are the same thing. Other than that, I would watch the next problem, and if you don't watch the next one, then definitely watch the fourth one, because the fourth one, like I said in the last video, is a super complicated problem that will almost definitely be very similar to something you see on the exam. So I'll see you later.